Welcome everyone to the Coalition for Marriage YouTube channel. Privileged to have you joining us again. If you're here for the first time, let me remind you that our purpose is to promote and stand up for the definition of marriage as one man and one woman for one lifetime. And the reason that's so important is why we've got a guest talking to us today, a lady called Katie Faust, who many of you may well have heard of. And those of you who haven't heard of, I hope you will never forget after today's podcast. Katie, would you like to say hello first?
I would like to say hello. Let me just say that my youngest kid is totally obsessed with London and Buckingham Palace and the royal family.
And it's a privilege to have you. For those of you who don't know, Katie runs an organisation called Them Before Us and has been doing for some time. And perhaps you can tell us a little bit about that in a minute. And out of that work has come a wonderful new book with that title, Them Before Us. And I know whatever time you listen to this podcast, it's going to be Christmas at some point in the future. And can I recommend that you put that book on your Christmas list for as many people as you can? And also, can I recommend that you share this video with your friends and family? This is one of those special videos and one of those special topics which is going to cover some absolutely amazing information. So Katie, I wonder if we can take a little bit of time, first of all, just to skip through the book and skip through some of the chapters. As I understand it, the premise of your book is that really, as a society, we should be putting children first in our decisions, that the rights and the needs of children we should be placing ahead of the wants and the desires of adults. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of places where we could apply that in this world, whether that's education or like health policy or whatever. But what we talk about in the book specifically is family structure, and that there are so many different questions that we have when it comes to marriage and family issues, whether, who gets to be on a child's birth certificate, all about the reproductive technologies and the ethical questions about surrogacy, questions about divorce, the definition of marriage, same-sex parenting, a parent coming out and becoming transgender, adoption, right? Every issue that you can think about that has to do with marriage and family, ultimately, if we get those questions wrong, it's the children who are the victims. So because children are so vulnerable, right? We really should look at policy issues and personal decisions when it comes to marriage and family through the lens of children's rights and children's needs. So that's the case that we make in the book, is we want to put them, the children, before us, the adults. Why? They are the ones that are vulnerable and innocent. We are the ones with volition. We are the ones that have the will, the decision-making power. We are the ones that are capable of handling hardship, not them. And so that's the whole point, is we should prioritize children above adults. And we are in a mess in this country specifically because we have failed to do that.
And you're absolutely not alone. Just so people know, the book isn't just your opinion. What you've done is systematically go through a significant international evidence base on current literature and literature going back through many years to draw out the evidence for what you're saying. It's not just your opinion, is it?
Right. And so there's two real serious distinctives of the book. The first one is we have compiled all of the best data that you're going to be able to find. And the good news is we have mountains of it. We've been studying family structure for decades. We have there's a lot that research can tell us about the needs of children and the importance of supporting their fundamental rights to be known and loved by their mother and father. And so we've got all the evidence. All of the studies really are on our side. But what we have never had are the stories. Right. The reason why we have continued to lose these marriage and family battles is because the other side tells a better story, because they've humanized their arguments in ways that we have not. And so that's probably the thing that we can deliver in this book. I say we because I've got this brilliant co-author that, makes it really easy to read. But the thing that you're going to hear from our book is you are going to look at all of these issues through the lens of children who have lived through these modern families, right? All of these families where they were told love makes a family, biology doesn't matter, gender is a social construct. You're so lucky to have a single mother by choice who wanted you enough to pay $30,000 to create you. I mean, and you're going to look at their real lives and what they lived with. And then you get to determine whether or not you're going to be willing to fight for them. But we've always, our side has always had the best data, the best research. We've had common sense. We've had natural law. We've had the 5 major religions of the world on our side when it comes to one man, one woman uniting for life. But what we've never had are the stories. And that's what our book brings you that you've probably never heard before.
I'd like to go through some of the areas that you cover in the book and talk about some of the detail, but can I pick you up on one of the things you said just now? In terms of the data, some of the people that would argue with the book will say, well, of course, there isn't that much data yet available for the other side. And if you just give it time, you'll find out that it tells a much better story. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, and that's actually true, right? That every time you have a novel family structure or a novel technological development, really you're not going to know the long-term impact until you've got those kids turning 20 or 30, who then you can find at random in your populations, survey their actual experiences, the actual things that they lived through. And so you can't necessarily say, oh, okay, you know, we can know without a shadow of a doubt that surrogacy is harmful to children because we just started doing it. It's really actually hard to make an intentionally motherless child. Nature didn't really set us up for that, did it? And so it's going to be a while before we have long-term randomized results from longitudinal studies on children who were born through surrogacy and then intentionally separated from their birth mother, and then very often raised completely motherless. So you're right, we don't have a lot of data on that. So we're going to have to look back on how other children of reproductive technologies have fared. Did they like being commodified? What did they think about money changing hands during their conception? Because we actually do have quite a bit of data, or at least some reliable data when it comes to children created through sperm donation. And then a little bit of when we've got children created through egg donation. And we've got about 100 years of experience with adoption and understanding the primal wound that is inflicted on children when they lose a relationship with the only parent that they know on the day that they are born. And so just because surrogacy, for example, is new, doesn't mean we know nothing. It actually means that we need to err on the side of what we do know before we rush into these experimental processes and promote them in the name of progress.
Yep. Yeah, you don't want to take risks unnecessarily with the children. So let's start off with biology. You make the point very strongly in your book that biological connection really matters. Would you like to elaborate upon that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So the book makes the case for children's natural right to their own mother and father. Children have a natural right to the two people responsible for their existence. And there's incredible power in defending that right. In chapter 1, we talk about how you will decimate every social issue that we are facing today in America, from youth homelessness to teen suicide to teen pregnancy to high school dropout rates, poverty, obesity, behavioral issues, high incarceration rates. All of those different issues that we are battling have one thing in common, and that is every demographic that populates all of those risks, all of those social ills, are disproportionately fatherless. Okay? So you're never going to fix any of the social issues. You're never going to achieve social justice until you can secure individual justice for individual children in terms of uniting them with both their mother and father. Spoiler, marriage is the best institution that does that for us. Okay? So why is that natural right so powerful? Why is it that these two people set kids up for success and as a result set all of society up for health? What's so amazing about this? And the answer is biology. Okay, that biology actually has a major role to play when it comes to child thriving. And before you guys do the typical freak out, like, oh, you must be against adoption. We'll talk about adoption. Okay, like we'll just put a pin in it. We'll come right back. I promise. Okay. So why is it that the biological parents offer so much, stack the deck in favor of kids, I think is the best way to put it. And it's for three reasons. Number one, it furnishes them with the adults who are statistically the safest, most connected to, and most invested in them. And this is where we probably have, I should actually look, probably 70 footnotes in this chapter of different studies that talk about how biological parents give their children more money for college, for example. Biological mothers tend to take their children to more doctor's appointments, ensure that their kids wear their seatbelts more than they do, for example, their stepchildren. And unfortunately, the most dangerous person in a child's life statistically is an unrelated cohabiting man, whether that's mother's boyfriend or whether that is a stepfather. Now, I know heroic step parents. You guys know heroic step parents, and those people need to be acknowledged. But statistically, children do not fare better when their mother marries a stepfather. Those kids fare about as well as children raised by a lone mother. If you are serious about child thriving, not any two will do. Children thrive. They are most protected. They are most invested in and connected to their biological parents. So biology does something that no other adults can do. The second reason why this natural right is so powerful, why biology matters, is because these two adults, and only these two adults, mother and father, give children something that they crave, and that is biological identity. So we know that children who are raised apart from their biological parents very often struggle with identity issues. We have seen it with adopted kids, and that is one of the main reasons why adoption agencies here in the United States have made this drastic swing from closed adoptions to open adoptions, because social workers recognize that even if children cannot be raised by their first family, they benefit from as many connections to their biological kinship network as possible. Children want to know from whom they came because it tells them who they are in a lot of ways. And now we see that children created through third-party reproduction are struggling with the same identity issues. The difference is the kids who are created through sperm and egg donation are intentionally separated from their mother or father, whereas adoptees are being raised by the people that are trying to mend that wound. So identity matters to kids. We see it when they hit the internet at age 18, scouring the interwebs, trying to find their missing biological parent. In the case of sperm donor kids, you know, they're often searching for their dozens or hundreds of half siblings too, because those connections matter to them. And number three, the other reason why this natural right is so powerful is because it gives kids the perfect gender balance every time. It amazes me that the left is obsessed with gender parity. You know, they love it when they've got the female Supreme Court nominee. They want female representation on corporate boards, and yet they have relentlessly spent the last couple decades destroying the one institution that gets the gender balance exactly right, and that's marriage, right? And men and women parent kids differently, in a complementary, distinct way. So different are the ways that men parent and women parent that many experts will say there's no such thing as parenting. There's only mothering and fathering, and kids need both. So protecting this right to a child's biological parent is the best chance kids have at health and wholeness and thriving.
So I think you cover in the book in separate chapters the idea that biology matters, a biological connection. You also distinguish that from what you've just mentioned, the fact that gender matters, that it's that two mums can never be a dad, two dads can never be a mum. And that's not meant to be a hurtful thing in any way at all. It's a factual thing. And I wonder if you'd spend a moment just looking at that gender issue, because some people would say, well, it doesn't matter at all, because some women are more masculine than some men, and some men are more loving than some women. So how can you possibly say that gender matters?
Well, I would invite you to read the book and read the close to 30 stories that we have of kids who are raised by same-sex parents, and let me know if any of them felt like their two wonderful, loving mothers, which many of them had, ever satisfied their craving for a father. And so what we call this is we call it mother hunger or father hunger. I've got plenty of kids in the book, and I run group chats for kids with same-sex parents as well. And many of them would say I was well loved by my two moms, or I was well loved by my two dads, but none of them have yet said to me, and that totally satisfied my craving for my missing parent. You know,
and you cite an awful lot of research from David Popenoe to lots of other people.
Yep.
And then also just living research, you know, the fact that the majority of males who are in prison, and the majority of prison population are of course males, and the vast majority of those come from fatherless backgrounds. You look at education and you say, well, actually, if you look at educational attainment among black children, among white children, among Asian children, and the attainment goes up in each of those three groups, and so it's directly inversely proportional to fatherlessness. So when fathers are around, education outcomes are better, etc., etc., etc. And living life seems to prove what you're saying there as well.
We have a little section in chapter 1 called Black Fathers Matter, where we make that exact case. That educational attainment is abysmal right now for our Black students. They're failing in so many different areas of life. And the explanation is not racism. The explanation is only 17% of Black kids make it to their high school graduation, living with only their married mother and father. Blacks used to outmarry whites. I mean, all through racism, all through slavery, Jim Crow. At the turn of the 19th century, Black women outmarried white women. This has zero to do with their capacity to love and commit and raise strong families. They were showing the white world how to do it for a long time. It has everything to do with the fact that many of our systems have de-incentivized the involvement of fathers in the home, and that has disproportionately hit the Black community. But we do see that, especially with education, that the rates of success racially correspond almost exactly to rates of father presence in the lives of kids.
So it's interesting because when we look at family breakdown and the effect on the family, there's been a lot of talk in our country recently about working class white boys being among the least favourable outcomes, or having the least favourable outcomes educationally, because of the increase in family breakdown, etc., that's been taking place. And it's worth pointing out, so you often get attacked for being a homophobe. So you say that, well, actually, you've just got something against two men marrying or two women marrying, but you point out that a lot of your supporters are same-sex attracted, as are a lot of our supporters. Our supporters come from all faiths and none, and yours come from all faiths and none. But it's people who realise that actually the best outcomes from a child's perspective on a population base is to grow up with their married biological mother and father. And that's not anti-anything, it's pro-child.
That's exactly right. And so our movement is, there's no adult group that's safe from us. Let me just put it that way. This idea that children have a right to their mother and father is going to make demands of every adult at some point in their life. And so what we say all throughout the book is, what is the solution to all of this? Adults need to do hard things. That's it. Right? In all of these different family situations and all of the different manifestations that we deal with throughout the book, whether it's adults struggling with infertility, adults who experience same-sex attraction, parents who are in a struggling marriage where they're really experiencing challenges, single, successful, wonderful career women who haven't met Mr. Right, who are 42 and desperately want to have a baby, teenagers or young adults who are in a romantic relationship and thinking about having sex before marriage, right? Like, in every single one of these situations, the only child-friendly solution is for the adults to do the hard thing. And so that's what we say. Single, married, gay, or straight, the onus is on you to do the hard thing, because the only other option is for the kid to do the hard thing. And we think that's an injustice. We think it should be the adults that do hard things. Now, the incredible thing about saying, look, kids have a right to their mom and dad, every adult needs to bend to that, is our same-sex attracted, gay and lesbian, even some transgender supporters that we have are like, yeah, that's how it should be. But you know what? I can't get on board with some of these other pro-family organizations, because they only seem to be worried about kids needing moms and dads when it has to do with gay marriage and gay parenting. They don't talk a whole lot about the sweet heterosexual couple that desperately wants a baby and is going to go get a sperm donor. And they seem strangely silent on the topic of divorce, which has ravaged children in this country for a couple decades, right? And so that's the thing is, you can actually build quite a coalition when you stand unflinchingly on the natural rights of children and demand that all adults conform. And that's what we're trying to do.
And you've spoken about marriage and divorce, and you deal with them systematically in their own chapters in the book very, very well. Summarize for us maybe, why is marriage important as opposed to cohabiting, for example?
Yes. So marriage is the most child-friendly institution the world has ever known. And that's because it unites the two people to whom children have a natural right. And it unites them for life, right? Or that was the original intent before no-fault divorce snuck in there and said, actually not. But marriage does something for kids that no other institution will ever do. And amazingly, even a child's cohabiting biological parents cannot deliver the same benefit to children as a child's married biological parents. They are drastically more likely to live in poverty, drastically more likely to be abused, much more likely to see their parents break up, and then probably cohabit, repartner with somebody else, have another baby, break up, cycle continues, right? So cohabiting unions are incredibly unstable. We talk in the book about how there's 3 staples of a child's social emotional diet, 3 things that they need to have massive amounts of if they're going to be emotionally nourished. Those 3 things are mother's love, father's love, and stability. If you're missing one of those 3 things, that's not to say the child is doomed, but yeah, they're going to be emotionally malnourished. It's going to be really hard for them to thrive at life. Cohabitation takes that stability away. Even if you have mom and dad loving them, it's very hard to find stability in a cohabiting relationship. Divorce also takes that away. That's one of the biggest problems with divorce, is instability is a feature of a child's life after divorce. As mom and dad, again, start the dating process over, and oftentimes have lots of new relationships in and out, job changes, moves, and oftentimes post-divorce, kids lose contact with their non-custodial parent altogether. So yeah, cohabiting is no substitute for marriage. Marriage is not just a piece of paper. It is the line between kids who thrive and kids who don't.
Yeah, and a little bit about, I suppose it's more of the idea of the covenant as opposed to the contract. So we're going to do this and we're going to stay together no matter what, which you simply don't have with cohabitation.
You know, I mean, cohabiting unions, what happens when you get up and you marry somebody? The husband says, I'm giving you 100% everything, all of my life, forever, in front of all our family and friends. And the wife says, I'm giving you 100% everything, all I have, forever, in front of our family and friends. It is equal, right? In cohabitation, you usually have one, it's a very asymmetrical commitment, if you can call it that. Oftentimes the woman's going, I'm going to give you an awful lot of myself because I really hope that you want to take this further and marry me. And he's going, man, it's so amazing to have somebody wash my underwear. This is incredible. Okay. So like you have an asymmetrical commitment in cohabiting unions, and that does not bode well for a long-term future.
And you talk in the book about divorce. You talk about no-fault divorce and how, as many have said, perhaps the earliest redefinition of marriage was no-fault divorce in the US. When Reagan said it was the worst thing he ever did, was to push for no-fault divorce. Why is no-fault divorce so bad? So why is divorce so bad? When the argument from the other position, if you like, is that surely children in an unhappy marriage are going to be unhappy children. Let's just get away from that as quickly as possible and let everyone start again.
Yeah, doesn't that sound nice? And that is what I know. Look, okay, so in my other life, when I'm not doing children's rights activism, I do marriage counseling. My husband's a pastor. Like, we are in it with couples that are struggling. I will never, never, never diminish the challenges that married couples face dealing with porn addictions or financial struggles or the trauma and the baggage from a broken childhood. There are very hard things that adults go through that make them very unhappy in a marriage. It's very real. It often takes incredible hard work to get through it, accountability, counseling, faithfulness, and sometimes just grit, sometimes just straight up grit to just keep it going. But let me tell you what you're doing when you're choosing divorce. Now, if it's a situation of abuse, obviously you need to get out of there, right? Because kids need to be physically safe.
Adultery, abandonment, those sorts of things.
Adultery,
absolutely right.
Addiction, right. But that's not the majority of divorces. The majority of divorces in our country is because romantically, they're unsatisfied, okay? Or they're unwilling to work through a problem that they very likely will face in their next marriage as well, okay? So what is divorce really? Divorce is when the adults say, oh, this cross is too heavy for me. Here, kid, you take it instead. That is what divorce is. And all of the research backs it up. We don't have to guess about the impact of divorce on children. We go through all the different ways that it impacts children for life. Their physical health declines. right? They are much more susceptible to different cancers, even to the common cold as they age, much more likely to have chronic health problems. It impacts their mental health. It impacts their emotional well-being. It makes it more difficult for them to form and maintain their own romantic relationships in the future. It diminishes their academic performance. Why? Why is that? Because of the three staples of a child's social emotional diet, right? Stability, mother's love, and father's love. So even in the best case divorce, the child loses stability. There's very few kids have a stable life after divorce. They're shuffling between homes. Oftentimes there's new people in and out of those homes, in and out, right? They join, they leave. And then oftentimes they will lose contact with one of their parents altogether. Even in the best case scenario, kids need 100% of mom and 100% of dad every day. In the best case scenario, they get 50% of mom, 50% of dad, not nearly enough of either one, right? So of course it should be no surprise that kids who have experienced divorce struggle in all of these different major areas. So this is an open and shut case. You cannot make a statistical case. You can find kids that were okay after divorce. In fact, many are okay because they worked it out. But the statistical case is fundamentally against you. Divorce will damage your kids in every way that kids can be damaged.
And that's the really important point. When you look at it on a population basis, growing up with your married biological mum and dad is by far and away the best environment for any child to grow up. Of course, there will be cases on both sides of the fence where that's not the case. But on a population basis, beyond any degree of doubt, that's the best thing for children, isn't it?
Yep, exactly. And that's what I'm saying. Like, that's what the fact says. That's what common sense says. That's what the research says. Now our book has given you the stories so that you can look in the faces of the kids who had to live without it.
The stories and the studies. And the important thing is it's not just best for the kids, but the kids grow up and form society. It's therefore best for society too. That's the thing. So let me just touch on one thing then. So are you okay with divorce for childless couples?
Well, so I actually think that adults should be able to choose the consensual relationships that they like. But here's the problem, and we cover this in the book. When you lower expectations for marriage, when you make marriage easy exit, marriage actually becomes more easy entry. Like if you have, it lowers the expectations for marriage all around, right? And so we actually can see a correlation between counties and states that have easy divorce laws, and they have lower quality marriages overall because expectations are lower. So the stories and the ideas that we tell people about what marriage is matters for everybody. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that couples should get divorced. I think that the reason why you're married to somebody and it's challenging is because you're finally having to look at your own challenges and struggles for the first time.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Because who was it said, you'll never marry the right person, because whoever you marry, once you live with somebody, you find out, wow, this is tough, and you have to adapt together. But the fact that you have borders on your arguments actually means that you end up sorting out more things than you otherwise would do, because you think we're stuck with each other. We may as well sort this out. Whereas if you haven't got that kind of obligation, or you can get out of it whenever you want to for no fault, no reason at all, my goodness, how on earth is that a way to live? That must be awful.
Yeah. And the way I talk about it with younger audiences is I say, you don't find your soulmate. You will become each other's soulmate.
That's it. Soulmate is something you look at in retrospect and say, that person became my soulmate over time. Absolutely right, because that's how long it takes. Shall we move on to the thorny issues then of same-sex parenting and maybe a little bit of adoption? So there are those who will say, well, look, hold on. Actually, we think the data will show that two mums can be as good as a mum and a dad, as long as they love enough, and one of them's biological. And for two dads, well, actually, we don't know which one of us is the biological dad. And so we both are committed in the same way. Where would you go with those kind of discussions?
So we have an entire chapter on same-sex parenting because I think that you guys should know more about this than anyone else. I think that you should be very familiar with the stories of kids who grew up intentionally motherless and fatherless, because it is it's a level of cruelty that's pretty hard to for the rest of us to understand, honestly. But we spend the first half of that chapter dissecting the research around this topic because there was so much fanfare around these studies that supposedly showed there was no difference between kids who are raised by two moms and two dads. And the reason why we spend the first two chapters of our book going through the extensive data we have on biological connection and the importance to child thriving and the differences between mothers and fathers in chapter 3 and how that contributes to child thriving is if you really understand the massive amounts of research that we have on those two topics, that actually answers the question of same-sex parenting, right? So the people that come to me and say, but yeah, here's all of these studies that say that kids fare no different. My quick response is, well, isn't that interesting? Because whenever we're not studying same-sex parenting, whenever we're studying any other kind of family household, whether it's single mothers or cohabiting unions or step-parent families, or even adoption situations, whenever we are not studying same-sex parenting, sociologists agree on three things. Number one, biology matters. That biological parents are more protective of, connected to, and invested in their children. Number two, that gender matters. Men and women offer distinct and complementary benefits to children. And the third one is that children suffer trauma. They suffer long-term loss and harm when they lose a parent, whether that's to death, divorce, abandonment, even if there's subsequently adoption, or reproductive technologies. So explain to me, if those three things are all agreed upon by social scientists, how magically none of it matters when you're talking about a situation with two moms or two dads, when they're always missing a biological parent, they're always missing the gender complementarity of mothering or fathering, and they've always suffered the trauma of parental loss. So how could those studies be true? Either those studies are true and everything else that we know about family structure is wrong, or maybe there's a problem with those studies. And the answer is there's a problem with those studies. So we talk in detail in the book about the methodological flaws of that research. And then we share the stories of kids who lived it themselves. You know, a girl who was raised by two moms and felt very protective of her moms when she was little, but would run out into the backyard when a plane flew over her house and wave, hoping that her father was on the plane and would look down and see her. And we profile the story of another girl who grew up with her father and his boyfriend. And she said, I was well loved by them. And I didn't even know that mothers existed. I was really happy until I saw the movie The Land Before Time when I was in kindergarten, and Littlefoot lost his mother. And I suddenly went, wait a second, there's a thing called mother, and it's a parent who's a woman who gave birth to me, and where's mine? And I want one. And then she talks about the mother hunger that she expressed by, in essence, clinging on to any woman in her life after that, a teacher, her aunts, her father's lesbian friends, because she craved that maternal love, even though she was well loved by these two men. So it should not surprise any of us. Most of us know kids who were raised by a single mom, even kids who have fathers who are deployed for a year. Those kids, when they're young, especially, they will start to call people daddy. That is not their daddy. Nobody has to tell kids that they need a mom or dad. They want it, and they want it, right? It's an instinct. It's a universal longing. It's actually what it means to be a human child, is to need and crave this love. So, and you don't need to take my word for it. You can read the stories of these kids themselves.
Yeah, and look at the data. And just to emphasize your point again, this isn't about whether or not people have the capacity to love children as same-sex couples or anything like that, or even as childless couples. This is about the children and their needs on a population basis and what they need, and that maybe adults should sacrifice their wants for the needs of the children. And to emphasize again, that's the point of your book.
Spoiler, my mother's a lesbian. She's been in a relationship with her partner for 35 years. Almost everything I do well as a mom, I do because that's how she parented me. She was and is an incredible mother. I love her partner. She's my friend. She's not my other mother. She's my friend. But neither of them satisfied my need for fatherly love. And thank God I still had my father in my life after their divorce who provided it for me. So this idea that two women can give everything that a child needs or craves is just lying about everything we know about children.
And you differentiate that a little bit from adoption. Let's just cover adoption quickly. So you say you're actually, you agree that adoption is the least worst alternative?
So if you don't mind, let's just hit reproductive technologies first, because it's helpful. A lot of people will think, well, adoption is redemptive and important, and I agree. And so they'll think, well, isn't reproductive technologies just like adoption? And the answer is nope, not in a million years. It's not. You know, reproductive technologies is the intentional separation. Well, I should say third-party reproduction, the use of a third party's sperm or egg or womb, right? That we are intentionally separating a child from one of their biological parents is a major problem. So what are the problems with that? We go through in the book about the major issues that kids created through third-party reproduction face. Those include identity struggles, wondering who I am. That's a major issue for kids. It often will throw them into a tailspin, especially if they find out later in life and had no idea that, oh my gosh, my father's not my father. Commodification. Many of them feel like they were a product and they were bought and sold because they were bought and sold. You can Google right now, egg donor catalog, sperm donor catalog, and you will find, you know, JCPenney, Sears Roebuck style catalogs, so you can purchase the material, genetic material for your kids. Many of them feel like a laboratory experiment because eugenics plays a role in a lot of these technologies. Instability. Many of these kids are more likely to experience unstable households. So there's a lot of problems. These kids are not faring well. The one major study that we have that was done on outcomes for kids created through sperm donation showed that they struggled much more with mistrust between them and their parents, with substance abuse, with psychological problems and identity issues. So this is not a great way to bring children into the world. It's actually a violation of their human rights. So first of all, we need to be really clear that nobody should be using third-party reproduction, not single people or married people or gay people or straight people. This is always a violation of the rights of children. Infertility is a crushing load. It is a monthly heartbreak. And the desire to have children is incredibly strong. But your desire for some connection to a biological child should never trump a child's right to connection with their biological parent. The adults need to do the hard thing.
And that's the key message of the book, isn't it, in a nutshell, really? That it may hurt and it may be bad and you may feel bereft and you may feel that you haven't been able to fulfill yourself in life, but actually the child's rights and needs are more important.
Someone's going to feel sad. Someone's going to feel hurt. Someone's going to have to do the hard thing. The choice, it's either going to be you or the kids. We think it should be the adults. So with that understanding of reproductive technologies, we spend chapter 9 contrasting what we call big fertility. And that was a phrase coined by my friend Jennifer Lahl, who did a documentary called Big Fertility. So big fertility is creating children through this marketplace, and adoption. So contrast big fertility and adoption. And these are two very, very different things. Even though in both cases, children are raised by non-biologically related adults, they are almost the exact opposite of one another. So adoption is an institution that is centered around the rights and the needs of children. Big fertility is a marketplace centered around the desires of adults. So I am an adoptive mom. I used to work at the largest Chinese adoption agency in the world. And when adoption is done right, every child that needs parents is going to be placed in a loving home. But not every adult that wants a kid is going to get one. If adoption is done right, the answer to a lot of adults is going to be no. You are not the right person for this child, right? And that is why adoptive parents need to go, like me, rightly need to go through months and months of background check screenings, home studies, references, physical exams, financial exams, examinations of our other children, approval by different government bodies, because social workers aren't fools. They know that placing a child with biological strangers is risky for kids. Reproductive technologies, the goal is to get adults a baby no matter the cost. There's no background check, there's no screening. The only check that needs to clear is the check at the bank. If you have the money, you will get the baby. And so a lot of people, we know, we've given samples in the book of people who never would have passed a background adoption check, who walk out of the hospital with an unrelated child. So this is a totally different thing, right? Adoption is about the well-being of the kids. Reproductive technologies are about the desires of adults. The psychological outcomes are different as well. Even though adoptees are not raised by either biological parent, and kids created through sperm and egg donation are raised by one biological parent, the adoptees fare better, which is mind-blowing, right? So there's some kind of dynamic here that means that adoptees are more psychologically healthy. And here's what I think it is. In both of these situations, the child has experienced a wound. They've experienced a loss. They have lost something they have a natural right to. But this group of kids who are being raised in adoptive families are being raised by the adults who are seeking to mend the wound. These kids who were created through sperm, egg donation, or surrogacy are being raised by the adults who inflicted the wound. These guys are being raised by the adults who chose to cut out one of their or both of their parents. And so what does that mean? It means adoptees can be more honest about their loss. They can process that more openly. They can dare to ask questions. These kids, they can't tell their parents anything a lot of the time, right? Because they're talking with the people responsible for their pain. So it means that these kids really suffer in ways that adoptees don't.
And let's just cover off same-sex adoption.
So we talk about same-sex adoption in the book, and you might be surprised to hear that I think that there are some situations where a same-sex couple may be the best placement for a child. But again, this is, so like the way this is popularly framed in the US is, do you think that LGBTQ people have a right to adopt? And my answer is no, because no adult has a right to adopt. Children who have lost their parents have a right to be adopted. Okay, the child is the client, not the adult. Now, because children benefit from the love of a mother and the love of a father, because they benefit from the stability of marriage, responsible adoption agencies will prioritize married moms and dads in the adoption process. But in this country, when you're talking about the great need of foster kids, for example, many of which are in sibling groups, many of which are older, many of which have serious special needs, or children overseas who oftentimes are in pretty dire situations and also can have serious medical conditions. Sometimes a married mother and father is not available or not willing to take that child on. And so then the social worker or the agency needs to make the best placement they can. And that might be with a single parent, or that might be with a same-sex couple. But we must understand very, very clearly that this is not about adults getting kids. This is about kids being placed in the situation that best serves them.
And let's just remind people, Katie, the book is Them Before Us. It's recently published. It's a really good read. It's got lots of stories, as well as lots of data, lots of factual information, and lots of personal information. And I might say it's written in a very entertaining way. So it really is a highly digestible book, which I would thoroughly recommend people to look up at all good booksellers, and maybe some bad ones too. Maybe we'll put a link to it in the description. But a really good idea for a Christmas present, I would say. Now, one of the criticisms of the book, of course, is that, oh, well, you've just cherry-picked your data to fit your arguments. How would you respond to that?
I haven't cherry-picked the data, but I've cherry-picked the stories. That's for sure. Yeah, like I said, the research and the studies and the statistics are totally on our side. When it comes to same-sex parenting, there are a couple new studies that are out that do show that there may be less, that maybe academic performance for kids with same-sex parents is not as impacted as we previously thought that it was. So I didn't include that in the book, but that research is very new. But what we know based on the best studies at the time the book was written, there's no cherry picking happening, right? But I did hand pick the stories to put in the book. Why?
Yeah.
Because kids who love that they have two moms, or kids who think that they're so happy that their parents got divorced, or kids that are there supporting, supporting their father who's transitioned into a woman because they're so glad he's now, living out his true identity. Those kids get a front seat at the parade, right? Those kids are the ones that are going to be lavished with love and praise, not just from the media, but from their own families. The kids who dare to express any pain or loss, which lines up more with the statistics, right? Statistically, we know that kids are suffering, and yet the stories of those kids are very hard to find because they're very expensive to tell. And so that is one thing that we do at our organization, is we create the space for them to be honest. And so you will find the stories here that you probably won't find elsewhere, because you'll hear the stories of kids that love it everywhere else. The ones that are honest about the struggles, they have been forced into the closet, really.
Yep. Yeah. And that's a very good point that you make in the book over and over again, was that although people, some children may wish they hadn't have grown up in a particular background, what they're not going to do is explicitly criticize those parents, those whatever you want to call them, people who brought them up, because they loved them and did their very best for them. And so they don't want to hurt them by actually saying, yeah, but nevertheless, I wish I'd had a mum, or I wish I'd had a dad.
The 40-year-olds who are still trying to manage mom and dad at Christmas time with their own kids and decide like, which house do we do Christmas on, because dad's new wife is really temperamental, and but mom, I don't want mom to be alone on Christmas. I mean, like, the kids of divorce can't even talk about this publicly. Even the stories of the kids of divorce that I gather, they're like, nobody can ever know that I wrote this. I am still trying to keep my warring parents at peace, or my father would be so angry if he knew that I shared this, right? And so, yeah, the cost is high for these kids. Yeah. And so it's no wonder that it's so rare that we actually hear these stories.
How could you make the book better?
I've thought of something.
Go on.
I wish that we had plumbed down a little bit deeper on the philosophical basis for children's rights. Children's right to their mother and father. Just because there's a lot of controversy, and even the academics disagree about exactly why and how and the language to use around it. And because it was so complex, we decided that we would not put our thumb on the scale one way or the other. But since we've written the book, I've done more reading and research. I actually came out with a video on it called it's the Colson Center here in the United States is a great Christian worldview organization, and I did a video with them on their platform called What Would You Say? And it's called Do Children's Rights Trump Parental Rights? And so in that video, we talk about why children's rights and parental rights are actually two sides of the same natural law coin. And I think that it would have been really helpful if I had explained that more in the book. And I didn't, because it's hard to understand. And it's hard for me to figure out I don't really know exactly which natural lawyer to give the most weight to. So I wish that I had kind of done the hard work of figuring that out sooner.
I mean, you highlight the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and you talk about the fact that it's the most ratified treaty, yet it's the most ignored, ironically. But the fact is, Katie, we probably live in a society where a lot of people, a lot of adults, if we're honest, do not think that children should take precedence. Actually, they would put their desires, they are putting their desires first, time and time again.
Rabbi Gilles Bernheim, I think, said, children are subjects of rights, not objects of rights. And we treat them like objects, right? Like I should be able to do to this child what I want, instead of seeing them as subjects of rights.
And that's an interesting point Carl Trueman made when I spoke to him recently. And he was making the point that once you change, for example, the definition of marriage, and and you take obligation out of it, and you make it all about love and desire, and you make it all about things like do I give my permission, etc., etc. You then, things like paedophilia become just a matter of social conscience, and as social conscience changes, the acceptance of things like that will inevitably change. In terms of thruples and bigger kind of family structures from that point of view, and all sorts of open relationships. And once you take away the objective focus on what the child benefits from uniquely and best, anything goes, essentially.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I won't be able to reach Carl Truman Heights on this interview, but that's what we say repeatedly, is that once, and I just tweeted that the other day, like, marriage is the most child-friendly institution the world has ever known because it unites the two people to whom children have a natural right.
Yep.
When it ceases to do that, it no longer serves children. It is now just a vehicle of adult fulfillment, right? If that's all that marriage is just a way for adults to be fulfilled, well, I'll tell you what, adults are fulfilled by all manner of arrangements and people and durations of time and all of that, right? And that is what we've done, is we have removed the child-centric aspect of marriage, and now it's just what makes adults happy. And so maybe a 5-year marriage makes you happy, maybe a marriage to somebody of the same sex makes you happy, maybe a marriage of 6 people makes you happy. There's marriage to yourself, that's now kind of a thing, sologamy, right? Sologamy. So maybe that makes you happy. So fine. Marriage is now just one of a bazillion things that adults use to make them happy, instead of the one thing that it used to do that no other institution could do, which was secure a child's world.
Yeah. Now I know you're really busy, and I'm grateful for the time you've given us. And I know that in each chapter of your book, you actually come up with some practical suggestions as to how to make progress in each of the different areas you're talking about. And we can't go through all of that, but I wonder, could you pick out a few things, maybe, how we can go forward? So already you've referred to things like, well, looking at adoption, you made the bold statement that we should give married men and women priority. Well, there's no Western society I know of that's willing to do that. And so all sorts of other things. But how do we then make progress on these issues in putting children's rights and needs before the wants and desires of adults?
We have followed the pro-life example. I feel like the pro-life world, fighting for a child's fundamental right, their right to life, actually has a lot to teach us about this. And so we do try to take a lot of what they do well and apply it to this side of the womb. And so what have they done well? They've offered empathy for the people that are in hard pregnancies, right? They've said, oh my gosh, I'm sorry about this diagnosis. I am so sorry that you don't have the support of your boyfriend. Or this must be really scary for you. But no amount of your feeling justifies snuffing out a child's right to life. I'm going to empathize with the adult, but I'm going to draw a hard, fast line in the sand that you cannot cross when it comes to a child's fundamental rights. So we need to take that same approach with adults. A gay man who very likely would be an incredible father, right? We say, your desire to have a child is good and natural. And I see incredible fathering qualities in you, but your desire for a family cannot trump a child's natural right to be known and loved by their mother. You're going to have to do the hard thing, either not having kids or forming your family around that child's right rather than around your romantic attractions. Like I said, deeply empathizing with married couples who are struggling, walking next to them, helping them, reading good books, praying with them, accountability, therapy, but having those hard conversations and saying, I know that you're really frustrated with your husband right now, but the alternative of splitting your child's life into 2 is an unacceptable solution to this. You two have to do the hard work so that your kids can have an intact life and home and heart. So on a personal level, I think that we can learn a lot from that. Just saying, we can empathize with adults because this is some of the hardest stuff that adults go through. Infertility, our gay and lesbian friends who are looking at forming families or want to form families, Like, these are really big things, but it still is not something that justifies violating children's rights to their mother and father. Adults need to do the hard thing. And so when it comes to policy, I think that the main thing that we need to do differently is share the stories of kids. It doesn't work to just say statistically children fare best with a mother and father, right? We need to say, so what would you say to these kids who desperately longed for their missing mother and father? I mean, what would you say to them? Are you that you're the acceptable sacrifice on the altar of progress? Is that what you would tell them? Because I don't think that that's true. So I do believe that we need to have the best research, and the good news is we do. But I think that when it comes to policy debates, like I know that Ireland is having a big debate right now about surrogacy. They really need to bring the stories of children created through big fertility to the forefront of that, because otherwise you're just up against justifiably emotional parents, right? No, we need to make children the focus of these conversations, not adults.
Yep, I agree with you. The data got the stories, fantastic advice there, and we need much more of that. And then also the numbers, so people to actually stand up and be counted and to share their opinion and not to be afraid of a little bit of rough treatment in terms of the consequences for doing that.
Well, and it may be more than a little bit of rough treatment. Honestly, this battle really sucks a lot of the time. Yep. You are going to lose friends. It might be more difficult even in your own family, right? If you choose to stand firm on this, but you know what? Kids are worth it. And if not you, then who? Politicians aren't going to do it. Your celebrities aren't going to do it, right? Academia is lost. The education system is in the bag, right? For ultimate adult expression, no matter the cost. It is you. You're the only hope that kids have. And so the good news is, like, what we've tried to do in this book, I dare you, read the book. And when you're done, you put it down, you will be more courageous. Okay, you just will, because now you're going to know who you're fighting for. And now you're going to know the cost of what happens when we lose. And that's probably not something that you're as aware of right now. But that's the incredible thing about a child-centric focus to all of these issues, is we're not against adults. We are for children, right? And we insist that all adults bend for children. So I would be stunned if you read the book and came away still feeling sheepish or unprepared. You will hopefully close it and feel bold, courageous, and equipped.
Katie, I think you're just a living advert and a wonderful advocate for everything that you're talking about. Very well done. Thank you for the book. Thank you for everything you've done. Thank you for taking some time with us today. Let me remind everyone again to share this video if you can with friends and family. Click that share button and let people know what's going on so they can join in the conversation too, so they can look for Katie's book and hopefully buy and read that too. Katie, all the best. I hope we have a lot more to do with each other going forward. Can I thank you for your time very much today?
Yeah, please. I would love to stay in touch. Thanks for having me, and don't be a stranger.
Can I thank you very much for watching? Remind you to click the like button and subscribe. Those things make a big difference to the YouTube algorithm, apparently. Don't forget to share this video with your friends and family. And also, if you want to give to the work of Coalition for Marriage, hop across to our website, click that donate button. Thank you very much. Take care. Until the next video.